The swiftest way to introduce difficulty in a game is to make the easy obtuse. It's economical to keep players busy by setting out a simple goal akin to open this door, while in reality presenting a 20-step process required to complete that goal in a way that only game logic can convey. In a real-life equivalent situation, you would knock, find a fire axe, kick the door in, search for a key, phone a friend, use a crowbar, or perhaps try to remove the hinges. But in a computer game, the developers can throw whatever obstacles toward you to prevent you from reaching that door and trying any strategy that actually makes sense. Pretty much the lazier its developer is, the more tediously complicated a game can become, because lazy development is only a matter of adding more and more superfluous obstacles to as small a plot of real estate as possible. This design philosophy, if you can call it a philosophy, isn't so often that bad in most games. In some shooter with a great gunplay model, it can even just mean more fun. But it's the absolute bane of an adventure game, and the worst example I've played of this sort of design is Anna. Anna is a puzzle adventure all about taking part in odd rituals to solve generally simple goals that lead to progression. That's certainly not a bad system when pulled off properly, especially in an environment as small as this game's, but only provided that the game actually knows how to handle puzzles. Right from the beginning, there is something pretty wrong with the game logic. There's surprisingly infrequent pixel hunting, but there's absolutely fuck all in regards to reasonable, thought-provoking puzzles. The story starts you outside a small house looking for a way in, and along the way through trying to combine anything and everything normally to be found in an overgrown backyard, you find out that, oh, a tree branch can in fact be used to push a large submerged boulder out of the way. Upon reaching the inside, all logic just spirals downward in a wild, unforgiving whirlpool. The first puzzle or two have some pretty questionable reasoning behind them, but they have a good setup explained in some enigmatic scrawlings and actually require some thought. They're pretty batshit crazy puzzles, but at the very least, they have some context and some setup. But beyond this introduction to the house, something changes about the puzzle design. There's no longer any context or setup. Instead, all the items you have to pick up, use, and combine are just there, sitting around and waiting to be activated in the oddest way you probably can't think of. There is no prompt, and there are so rarely any objects that actually make sense to be used on one another. Fairly early on in the game, I had got myself stuck on a puzzle for quite some time. Now, I'm a fucking idiot, but I'm not the kind to give up without trying most things more than once. So I tried most things more than once, and came to the conclusion that my copy of Anna was malfunctioning, and asked the developers about my problem. They responded with a full walkthrough in an attached PDF file that, of course, got me past my impasse by telling me to do something absolutely unrelated first. Because a puzzle adventure system is pretty hard to describe in detail without spoiling, I'm going to get specific and spoil a few puzzle solutions just to show how nonsensical they get. Here are three. I want you to guess which one doesn't actually occur in the game. Use the dagger on a child depicted in an etching on the wall to produce a beating heart. Place the heart in the stove and burn it. Fertilize the tree roots growing out of the wall and then pick them up. Place one root on each of the 6 windowsills and burn them all. Use your dagger to cut a weird crying growth at the top of a tree sticking through the floor. Collect its blood and use it on a symbol painted on the wall to receive a key. The correct answer is, of course, all of these procedures are in the game, and they're just there. They have no prompt or logical design. You're just expected to pick up everything you see and figure out what to use on what. Really, all you're given are some really vague item descriptions to lead you in a really vague direction. After a while, though, I did actually realize that there was something wrong about my copy of Anna. The hint system wasn't working. Now, there is a hint system, and I don't know what kinds of hints it gives, but if it's like any other hint system I've ever used, then it certainly won't fix the game. After all, hint systems go in addition to the initial prompt of a puzzle, and Anna has no initial prompts. All a hint will do is nudge you closer to a solution, whether or not the puzzle has any logical basis. No doubt, a hint system probably makes progression less difficult in a game as poorly designed as Anna, but it doesn't keep that game from being poorly, sloppily designed. Anna is also a horror game, and to its credit, it pulls off horror a few measures better than it pulls off adventuring. It tries to take advantage of your fear of the unknown, the feeling that conjures when you're home alone with most of the lights off and you just don't feel like going down into the basement to get a bag of tortilla chips because against all odds there just might be a Borg drone down there waiting to assimilate you. Once in a while it has some real shiver fuel with great use of sound and shadows that really delivers on the haunted house vibe. However, the majority of the horror element is still very unrefined. In one particular instance, I had set off a scripted event by completing part of a puzzle that made a spooky noise. I decided to investigate and, in my haste, walked the wrong way and snuck up on a dark figure without it noticing me. The horror element is also tied to your progression and feeds off your reaction, and the way it does this is unique and sounds great on paper, but it's pretty self-sabotaging in practice. Whether or not you react in time to the scripted scares determines your sanity, which changes the world around you. The problem is that your ability to complete the entire game hinges upon whether or not you've experienced sanity-lowering events, because some puzzle items only appear or become useful in certain ways upon reaching certain levels of sanity. If you're just not interested enough in a boring old tapping noise coming from a nearby room, you'll end up skipping some event that determines how much of the game you actually get to play. You can actually miss enough scripted events that the game will just let you exit the house and completely end the story before you even go upstairs into its second half. And even though it's not a very interesting story apart from a twist at the very end, it's ludicrous that the developers just gave people the option to skip almost all of it. These events are also triggered seemingly by a combination of very specific interactions and random triggers, so lowering your sanity enough to make progress can degenerate into a matter of walking around and clicking on everything, which is pretty sanity draining, I'll admit, but not in the way I think the developers had intended. Anna is the kind of game that feels like it needed a few thousand more layers of polish before it was released. It's a very amateur attempt at designing puzzles and creating an atmosphere, and there must have been a lack of serious playtesting going on to help the developers achieve their goals properly. Next to nothing in the game relies on genuine intellectual challenge, and everything amounts instead to this impenetrable, illogical mess that I'm not even sure actually wants to be experienced all the way through. While there are some good moments, the horror element is normally either broken or extremely fragile. The game as a whole is very shallow and pretty forgettable, feeling as though it took more inspiration and work ethic from a haunted house amusement park ride rather than something like Jacob's Ladder or Lovecraft's works. It's just too lazy to have done anything right.